Welcome to the intriguing case of Sherri Rasmussen, a story filled with love, betrayal, and tragedy. Sherri, a young nurse with a bright future ahead, faced a dreadful fate when she was brutally murdered in her own home. At first, it seemed like a regular break-in at Sherri Rasmussen's home that ended badly. But as detectives looked closer, they uncovered more complicated secrets. The investigation revealed surprising facts, suggesting that someone from the organization meant to protect the public might be involved. Sherri Rasmussen was born on February 7, 1957. When she was just 16 years old, she got into Loma Linda University to study critical care nursing. She was really good at her studies and worked hard. As she grew up, she got a job at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. She became the director of nursing there when she was only in her mid-20s. People liked Sherri a lot. She was always happy and smiling. She made others happy too. She was known for being very beautiful and for her kindness. Sherri was the kind of person who would cheer you up when you were feeling down. During the spring of 1984, Sherri met a man named John Rutan. He worked as a mechanical engineer. They really liked each other from the very beginning and fell in love quickly. Things between them started moving very fast. They decided to get married in 1985, but sadly, their marriage didn't last long as something very terrible happened in their home. The story begins on February 14, 1986. John Rutan left their house on Balboa Boulevard in Van Nuys to go to work. Sherri was also supposed to go to work, but she didn't want to. She had a presentation that day, but she thought it wasn't important, so she told her husband that she might lie and say she hurt her back in an accident the day before. She wanted to stay home instead of going to work. John encouraged Sherri to go to the presentation anyway. He thought it would be a good idea for her to attend, but Sherri still wasn't sure what to do. She stayed in bed under the covers even after John left the house. At approximately 9:45 in the morning, a neighbor noticed that John's garage was open, but there was no car parked inside, which seemed strange to the neighbor. Then, at around 10 a.m., John tried calling home, but there was no answer. He kept calling, hoping Sherri would pick up, but she didn't. At first, John thought maybe Sherri had gone to work, like he suggested, and was busy with her presentation, so he didn't worry too much about it. Soon after, John decided to call Sherri's secretary to check if she had seen Sherri at work. The secretary informed John that she hadn't seen Sherri that day. This news started to worry John. Sherri's sister also tried calling, but Sherri didn't answer. Meanwhile, a maid cleaning a nearby unit reported hearing loud screams coming from John's house around 12:30 p.m. The screams sounded like there was a fight between two people. When John returned home from work in the evening, he saw that the garage doors were open. Inside the garage, he noticed that his wife's BMW, the car he gave her as an engagement gift, was missing. What startled him even more was seeing broken glass scattered on the driveway. As he entered the house, he made a shocking discovery. He found Sherri's body lying on the living room floor. She had been shot 3 times. This was a devastating and heartbreaking moment for John. There were signs that Sherri had tried to defend herself. Furniture in the living room was knocked over, and the whole house was in a mess. It seemed like there was a struggle. John found a broken porcelain vase near Sherri's body, suggesting that she might have been hit with it before she was shot. It was clear that she fought hard to protect herself before the tragic end. As John searched the house, he made another chilling discovery. He found a bloody fingerprint on the burglar alarm panic button. It seemed like Sherri was trying to press it in a moment of panic, but couldn't. Sherri also had wounds on her body that suggested she tried to defend herself. She had bruises all over her face, and the wounds looked like they were caused by the muzzle of a gun. The attacker tried to muffle the sound of the gunshots by shooting Sherri through a thick blanket. This was likely done to avoid attracting attention. When the police arrived at the scene, they also found bite marks on Sherri's body, adding another disturbing detail to the investigation. The investigators found that Sherri was wearing a bathrobe when she was attacked, suggesting she wasn't expecting any guests at that time. The police concluded that it was likely a burglary gone wrong because the intruder probably intended to steal electronics and jewelry. However, Sherri unexpectedly encountered the burglar, leading to a violent confrontation that ended in her death. The intruder then fled the scene, taking off with the BMW parked in the garage. Although the car was later found, it didn't provide any useful evidence for the case. Strangely, the only thing missing from the house was the couple's marriage certificate. At first, the police had suspicions about John's involvement, but as the investigation progressed, they ruled him out as a suspect. John grieved his wife and felt his loss such that quitted his job and left Los Angeles in an attempt to start his life over. It's truly heartbreaking that a harmless woman was killed in such a terrible manner. This makes us wonder, who could have done such a thing? And why would they attack an innocent woman in her own home? These are questions that need answers, and the search for the truth will hopefully provide them. As the case was being investigated by the detective, they looked into Sherri's background. Sherri's father, Nelson Rasmussen, came forward and apparently played a role in the capture of the culprit. Nelson was not convinced that his daughter was killed by burglar and that his daughter was 6 feet tall and had physical presence and shaped body that no one could have easily overcome her in a fight. Struggle, meanwhile, the police had told the police that the burglar lasted for at least an hour and half. Nelson also felt whoever had shot his daughter must have done that from a close range and had silenced the gunshot with a quilt. He claimed was killed deliberately and not a victim of burglar. Nelson mentioned a lady named Stephanie Lazarus, whom his daughter had talked about often because they were close. Stephanie used to date John before he married Sherri. They were together in college at the University of California, but John saw their relationship as just friends with benefits. However, Stephanie felt differently. She became obsessed with John and was heartbroken when he married Sherri Rasmussen. Stephanie was a detective with the LAPD, and her past with John raised suspicions in the investigation. In August 1985, Stephanie wrote a letter to John's mother expressing her love for him and her refusal to accept their breakup. Since then, Stephanie had been frequently visiting John's house, even when he wasn't home. She would come up with reasons to be there, like picking up ski equipment. Sherri, John's wife, felt uncomfortable with Stephanie's presence and told John about it. Despite Sherri's discomfort, John didn't do much to stop Stephanie from visiting, assuring Sherri that Stephanie would eventually leave. Sherri was shocked each time Stephanie showed up, but John didn't take strong action to prevent it. John's failure to take action against Stephanie, despite Sherri's discomfort, was a big mistake. He should have listened to his wife and made sure Stephanie stayed away from their home. This negligence ultimately led to tragic consequences, costing him his wife's life. It's a sad reminder of the importance of taking concerns seriously and acting on them to prevent harm. Despite Nelson's efforts, the police didn't follow up on other leads. Even when DNA testing became possible, they didn't test the evidence because they didn't have a suspect. Meanwhile, Stephanie continued her career with the LAPD and later started her own investigation firm. She even received awards for her work. Years later, new DNA technology led to a re-examination of cold cases, including Sherri's murder. The DNA analysis showed that saliva found at the crime scene belonged to a woman, challenging the original burglary theory. Even with Jennifer Francis, a new investigator, trying to reopen the case and follow new leads, she faced problems within the LAPD. When she found out that the likely person responsible was a woman and might have had a connection to the victim's husband, the detective in charge didn't take it seriously. He insisted it was just a burglary, ignoring the evidence suggesting it was a planned murder. Because no other detectives wanted to keep investigating, the case was put aside again. This left Sherri's family without answers and made people wonder if the investigation was fair. In 2009, detectives Nuttall and Barber decided to look into Sherri Rasmussen's murder again in Los Angeles. They were interested because the DNA evidence pointed to a female suspect, which didn't match the original idea that it was a burglary. They thought someone had purposely made the crime scene look like a break-in to confuse the police. Many things didn't make sense, like the jewelry box that wasn't touched and no signs of forced entry. The detectives, Nuttall and Barber, looked into 5 women who could have been involved in the crime. One of them was Stephanie Lazarus, who worked as a detective at the LAPD. Despite her good reputation and successful career, they couldn't rule her out as a suspect. They quietly gathered evidence against her without revealing their suspicions. They found out that Stephanie had a gun similar to the one used in the murder. Plus, she wasn't working on the day of the crime, which meant she had the chance to do it. They also discovered that Stephanie had kept in touch with the victim, which made them more suspicious. Finally, they got a DNA sample from Stephanie, and it matched the evidence from the crime scene, making her the main suspect in Sherri's murder. On June 9th, 2009, Stephanie was taken into custody and accused of murdering Sherri Rasmussen. Many LAPD officers found it hard to believe that Stephanie, who used to work as a detective, could be involved in such a serious crime. Stephanie was taken to court to face trial. It was revealed that in 1986, Stephanie entered the couple's home without being noticed. She then shot the wife and made it seem like a robbery before leaving the scene. On March 8, 2012, the court declared her guilty of first-degree murder for killing her ex-boyfriend's wife. As a punishment, she was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Nelson accused the police of not doing enough and not acting appropriately at first in his daughter's case. However, it was said that the police couldn't be sued for this kind of mistake. Sherri Rasmussen's murder is a tragic tale of justice delayed but eventually served. Despite initial setbacks and years of uncertainty, diligent investigators and advancements in forensic technology uncovered the truth. The police had done a terrible job handling this case, and Stephanie should have been looked into when Sherri's father mentioned it at first. If you found this case interesting, please show your support by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified whenever we release new true crime stories. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you more compelling content. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to sharing more intriguing stories with you in the future.